Hi folks, hope you're doing well. So I'm making a series of videos on the works of Dr. Jacques Vallee and his theory regarding the UFO, UAP phenomena. This video will be based on his book, Dimensions, a casebook of alien contact. Now for those of you not familiar with Dr. Jacques Vallee, he's an astrophysicist by training and a computer scientist by profession. He's an all-around inventor and creator, and quite frankly, such a towering intellect that I'm surprised there aren't more videos on his works. So what stands out most about Dr. Vallee is that he rejects the idea that the UFO phenomena is extraterrestrial in origin. The data, he says, is far more complex, and I would say even disturbing, than something that can be reduced to aliens piloting a nuts and bolts craft from a distant star system. And it may very well be that UFOs are part of a much wider paranormal phenomena. So here's the case against extraterrestrials. First, there are far too many landings. At the time of his writing in 1988, there were an estimated 3 million landings over a 2-decade period. But why so many? With our current technology, we can send a single probe to orbit a planet and understand its surface environment within a few weeks. It's absurd that there be so many UFO landings, and it gives the sightings the impression of being staged. In other words, if you ever saw a UFO, it's likely because you were intended to see it. Now, what about these crafts themselves? Most witnesses actually don't report a craft, but rather they report a luminous orb that appears, performs some kind of odd flight pattern in the sky, and then vanishes. These objects are sometimes seen growing in size, other times shrinking, still other times they divide into multiple objects, and sometimes multiple objects merge into one object. These are features more common with a hologram or projection than something material. It is possible, though, that there is a machine behind the projection, but the machine remains out of view. And then there are these absurd humanoids, the so-called aliens. Although most people are familiar with the Greys, one of the most common beings reported in the 60s and 70s were dwarves in diving suits, robots, and even humans speaking human languages. If aliens were biologic life that evolved on another planet, we would not expect them to look anything like us, let alone walk normally on our planet, or be able to breathe our air. The UFO knots claim to be from all sorts of places, famously from Zeta Reticuli, but also Uranus, Venus, Clarion, Orion, and Pleiades. It's almost as if they want to puzzle us by the locations they claim to be from. Now, the biggest argument in favor of the extraterrestrial hypothesis are the so-called abductions. Now, surely these traumatic experiences, including missing time, scars, and implants, necessitate that we are dealing with aliens. But how is it that any doctor can draw blood without leaving a scar, but these aliens, from a supposedly advanced civilization, routinely leave marks? What the aliens are alleged to be doing with their hybridization program is grotesque when you compare it to modern in vitro fertilization techniques. So what kind of aliens need to go to our medical school to get better training? It just doesn't make sense. And in fact, the whole narrative has a very dreamlike character to it and sounds absolutely absurd. But this does not mean they are fake. Dr. Vallee is clear that what experiencers remember is a real occurrence. He suggests, however, that it should be interpreted symbolically. The UFO may not be a spacecraft at all. It may be simultaneously a window into another reality and some sort of physical entity. Now, in addition to the absurdity that runs through the entire narrative, it's an interesting fact that the same elements that constitute the modern UFO phenomena can be found in other older phenomena. So take, for example, the fairy faith of Celtic countries, which was prevalent up until the 19th century. The folklorist Walter Yealing Evans Wens, recording the accounts of many sane and credible people who reported fairies manifesting as luminous lights in the sky, sylphs that would abduct people at night and take them to fairyland, and even elves that engaged in a sort of hybrid program, creating elves that appeared like humans and lived in human society. Notice how all these elements that make up the modern UFO phenomena already existed in another guise, that of the fairy faith, but the same elements were also found in other paranormal phenomena. Take, for example, the mass sightings of airships across the US in the late 1800s, the so-called miracle of the sun at Fatima, Portugal. And this may be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. See, for example, this Phoenician scroll that depicts beings emerging out of a sun disk. We really don't know how far back this whole phenomena goes. In short, Dr. Vallee proposes that these phenomena that have been relegated to myth and folklore may have been real manifestations, unified by a single underlying point of genesis. The manifestation that is generated fits the zeitgeist of a given time, place, and culture. This explains why elves and gnomes still manifested up until the 19th century, but now a more technical and secular manifestation occurs in our own. But it goes further because the phenomena is not just consistent with our time and culture, but it also appears to be steering humanity in a particular direction. This is what Dr. Vallee refers to as the spiritual control system, and it forms a key part of his theory on what the phenomena is. So let me quote from his book Dimensions. This is page 272. He says, quote, I propose there is a spiritual control system for human consciousness and that paranormal phenomena like UFOs are one of its manifestations. I cannot tell whether this control is natural and spontaneous, whether it is explainable in terms of genetics, of social psychology, or of ordinary phenomena, or if it is artificial in nature, under the power of some superhuman will. It may entirely be determined by laws that we have not yet discovered. So he says this is what's occurring. We can see the effects, but we don't know if the cause of this, quote unquote, is artificial or something natural. So rather than contact, what we may be dealing with is control, a control system that directs us for some unknown end. We may in fact be like rats in an experiment having to choose between two levers. The experimenter knows that pressing one lever gives us food and pressing the other lever gives us nothing. We, as simple rats, do not even understand that we are in an experiment. But when we discover one lever gives us food, we keep pressing it. Dr. Vallee is telling us not to press that lever. Let's go hungry for a bit and try to figure out what is really going on here. We may never discover who our teachers or these experimenters are, but there does appear to be some purpose behind the control, and that control seems to be shaping our thinking on a foundational level. So again, this is from Dr. Vallee's book. This is from 276. He says, quote, my speculation is that a level of control of society exists which is a regulator of human development, and that the UFO phenomena should be seen at this level. What would explain this? It would certainly explain why there is no overt contact. Direct contact would preclude genuine learning. It also explains some of the statements made by the euphonauts, such as, you should believe in us, but not too much. It explains the absurdity of many cases, where reactions to the phenomena may have been evoked in terms of nonverbal consciousness rather than in logical terms. This would explain why so many witnesses are incapable of finding words to describe what they have seen, and would explain the sexual and genetic aspects which reinforce the signal by encoding it with the most powerful emotions of which men and women are capable, and with the violation of human taboos. And from page 277. Myths define the sets of things scholars, politicians, and scientists can think about. They are operated upon by symbols, and the language these symbols form constitute a complete system. This system is metalogical, but not metaphysical. It violates no laws because it is the substance of what laws are made from. The theory does not explain how UFOs are made to appear to us, although it gives support to one idea about them, that they are constructed both as physical craft, a fact which has long appeared to me undeniable, and as psychic devices, whose exact properties remain to be defined. So the effects that UFOs have on us is on the mythic and foundational level. And let's just take a moment to consider how destabilizing this is to any sense of epistemology or worldview. What if I were to suggest that the control system is what deceived a group of apostles into believing Jesus of Nazareth resurrected by generating resurrection appearances? What if the same control system generated the famous aerial sign witnessed by Constantine that ultimately led to his and the Roman Empire's conversion to Christianity? Or what if this system seized a certain virtuous Arabian merchant while he prayed in a cave and made him believe an angel was bringing him a revelation in his own language? You see, the implications are truly disturbing, and it may very well be that the future of Christian and Muslim apologetics will not be against each other, but against accusations that their respective revelations were deceptions produced by a control system. We, in our atheist-leaning societies, are not protected from the deception either. We are being driven to believe biologic entities that evolved on another planet have developed technology advanced enough to travel to Earth. We may be soon approaching an event where the control system will generate a mass spectacle that will be so profound, so far-reaching and undeniable, that we will be ripped out from our current materialist paradigm and thrust into one more paranormal and, dare say, irrational. As the intellectuals of ancient Rome put down their books of philosophy to study the Bible, we will put down our science books and spend the next 1,000 years pondering what the telepathic ETs had to say about our reality. Quite an interesting future. I will conclude with the challenges Dr. Vallee mentions in investigating the phenomena. At the time of his book's publication, he mentioned what he calls the triple cover-up. First, there is the official denial of the phenomena. So, this is the Condon Report. Second, there are the convenient explanations that do not explain, but instead provide skeptics grounds to dismiss the phenomena, such as the Phoenix Lights incident. Lastly, there's the problem that the phenomena is deceptive and denies itself. It wants us to believe there are extraterrestrial visitations. Now, of these three, I would say the last one remains the biggest problem, but mixed in with this is another element involving political exploitation. Dr. Vallee mentioned that he was certain that intelligence services were involved in fabricating at least 2 cases of so-called alien contact to create religious cults around them. As we witness the UFO phenomena move from a taboo subject to a validated reality, we must remind ourselves that the threat of political manipulation remains. Be cautious of talks about physical threats, that these beings are extraterrestrial, or even that this is future humanity going back in time. We are unfortunately operating in the dark and under multiple streams of deception. Hopefully, intellectuals like Dr. Vallee and his team of scientists will be given greater credence, and the public will be led closer to the light.